The What to Read Next podcast helps you build a TBR of each your favorite books. In each episode, Lori and Maine interviews authors and book influencers to recommend books they loved for you to pick up today. If you're an avid reader, always looking for your next great read, then this show. Hi, Elizabeth. Welcome to What to Read Next podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So happy to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I was about to tell you how many books I've written, and now I've forgotten. I think this is my 14th book that I just put out. And I live in DC, and I've got 3 kids, and that's about it, I think.
I love the DMV area. I live in DC. Well, I live in Maryland, but because I went to grad school in that area, and I got to travel quite a few times to go back and forth because I live in New York. So I had like a business down in DC every so often, and it's like such a fun city to go. It's very political. It's very political, but it's a fun city, to be. So, how's the weather over there? Like
it's like, I don't know how it is where you are, but it's like 85 degrees. Suddenly it goes from like being like 15 degrees to tropical here.
Yeah, I moved so now I live in Florida, so I have 80-degree weather, but my company is in New York. So we were just having a staff meeting and we're all in the same weather. We're all in 80-degree weather right now.
Crazy. But I love it because my kids are all like cold weather, but for me, like 85 is the perfect temperature. So
it is a good temperature to be. So, all right. So we got to talk about The Summer We Fell because it's a forbidden romance you're giving us. It's a little bit more angsty. Tell us the elevator pitch.
Okay. It's 2 people who are ostensibly enemies come together in what's sort of their hometown, to commemorate the death of their friend, and the opening of this foster home, in his honor. And, but it turns out that everything isn't as it seems. And there was something between them that was not supposed to have been there a decade before. And they're giving into it in the present day.
Yeah, so the reviews are basically saying it's great. It's definitely like it took me by surprise, which is actually, as a reader, sometimes that's what we need. Like we need an author who takes us by surprise.
Well, I tried to prompt people because I knew that after coming out of the Devil series, everybody's gonna be like, oh, banter and like jokes. And there's not any really banter and there's not jokes. Like it's like very angsty. And I tried to prompt people, but all the reviews are like, oh, it's so angsty. And I'm like, I said so in the blurb. I don't know what else I could have done.
Yes, it's actually fits my mood right now because in therapy I have to work on my feelings. So any angsty, any emotional things are what I'm supposed to be reading, Okay. So you're actually one of those prescriptions that I got. Like this is where I am. Like I actually, as I was telling you, I was like, I listened to the Devil series because it's just fun and banter and like it's comforting to listen, but at the same time, like, what do you have to work on?
Right.
So speaking of the Devil series, talk to us about your backlist. Like, what can readers expect if they're trying to go back to your backlist?
So if they've just read The Summer We Fell, then like the other books I have that are kind of similarly sort of angsty and a little serious and have like a bit of a forbidden element would be, first of all, Waking Olivia and Drowning Aaron. Which are probably the most similar to this book in tone, or the Parallel series. And the Parallel series does have like a tiny bit of like, it's almost, I guess it's paranormal, but it's more like almost magical realism. But it feels contemporary for the most part. At least the first 2 books in the series feel like contemporary romance with a tiny touch of paranormal, but it's similarly sort of angsty and a little suspenseful. And then there's the Devil series, which is completely different. And that's, I guess they have a little angst, but they're kind of lighter and funnier.
Yeah, the Devil series is like if you need that rom-com idea of like, little banter, like just fun, just frothy books. Those are your frothy books,
Yeah.
So.
And like it was during the pandemic, or I guess it was actually it was during the pandemic that those came out. But Yeah, it was just like such a dark time that I did not want to write. When it first started, I did not want to write angst. I was like, oh, so yeah. And I was rereading a lot of like my favorites, like The Hating Game, and Christina Lauren, and like books like that.
Yeah.
Um, and that's all I want. I didn't want to write anything super serious, and so yeah.
Yeah. And now that we're emerging in the post-pandemic world, we can bring up the gangs.
Yep, I'm bringing the angst back. Exactly.
Yes, I love this. All right, so let's talk about some books. What kind of books do you tend to read? Like what you're reading right now? Because I know you used to read romance, but you have shifted, you know. So
Yeah. So I think that basically the issue is that I now, like, especially because I'm working so much, I'm really pretty tired by the time I allow myself to read, which is pretty late. And I have such a short attention span that something's basically got to be able to keep me awake. So it's got to suck me in right away. And so to be honest, in the past year, I've read almost exclusively like mysteries.
yeah.
And it's weird. And actually it's funny because I talked to a lawyer who does a lot of stuff for authors. And she was like, oh yeah, if you're a romance writer, you shouldn't read romance at all because you might accidentally steal someone's ideas and not know it.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go that far with it, but yeah, it's kind of convenient that I'm not reading romance, so I don't have to worry that I'm going to steal someone's ideas.
Well, I think in some ways, like sometimes mysteries and thrillers are like a good, like they capture attention. There are a lot of twisty turns. Sometimes it's nice to know that the husband didn't, kill the wife. It's supposed to be like they're gonna live happily ever after. Like there's
Right.
something to be said about like just kind of like a palate cleanse completely. Like just it's twisty, it's turny, it's grabs your attention, it's more plot driven, and it keeps you going. So
Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah. It is
I'm
all
sure I'll
good.
come back to romance eventually. I just,
It is all good.
yeah.
Do you have any books to recommend our listeners to pick up?
Oh, I had my little list and let me see what I had said. I mean, I didn't want to recommend the same books that The Hating Game is my number one forever book,
Yeah.
but everyone's already read like who hasn't read The Hating Game? That's not a new recommendation to anyone. So I really liked Sweet Filthy Boy by Christina Lauren.
Mhm.
I've reread that multiple times. I think those are like the best sex scenes of any book ever.
Mhm.
So love that one. And I think he's like one of the best, if not the best book boyfriend ever.
Yeah.
The guy in there.
Yeah.
Have you read it?
Yep. I read it. It's one of my favorites. It's like my favorite Christina Lauren series.
Yeah.
The whole series is just like, it's just fun. It's sexy. It's spicy. It's just like, there's just lots of banter and just like really good stuff.
There's just something about that one book in particular. I don't know what it is, but I love that book.
Yeah.
And then I really liked All the Missing Girls by Megan Miranda, which is not a romance, but it has a romance in it. And it was a really surprising one that you're really sucked in by this book and you don't expect this romance. And then you're just like, it's so gratifying because you weren't expecting it. So I loved that. I think my favorite read of last year was The Silent Patient. Have you read it?
I did. I read it. Yeah, the twist at the end.
Yes, the twist. And that's my whole thing is I love a book with a really good twist. And I love when you completely 100%, like, I feel like I'm one of these people who I'm like, oh, I know who did this. Oh, I know what's happening here. And I love when it's kind of like when you watch the movie The Sixth Sense and you're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, when you finally get it at the end.
Yeah.
I love when all the groundwork has been laid out perfectly and then you're still shocked.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then I also hate books where the opposite is true, where it's a big twist, but the groundwork was never laid out. And you're like, oh, come on now. You had to like leave some little clues along the way. Like that's BS. Yeah. So The Silent Patient I thought was brilliant because it had an amazing twist that you 100% did not see.
Yeah.
And he laid out all the groundwork. Like as soon as you saw it, you were like, oh my God.
Put all the pieces together. Yeah.
Yes, I tell everyone to read that book now. And then as far as romances, another romance that I thought was absolutely amazing, and I don't think I've ever seen anyone recommend it, it's called A Girl Like You by Gemma Burgess. And it is so cute. This girl, she ends up moving in with these two guys, and one of the two guys, one guy, and it takes place in England, in London. And this guy is kind of a player, and so they're just friends. Like, he's clearly like not someone she's going to be interested in. But they become very good friends. And then she starts dating this guy who's sort of a douche, and he's her friend through the whole thing. And then it becomes increasingly clear that he's interested and she's not getting it. But it's really, really cute. And I don't know why no one talks about this book, because it deserves to be like the book that you see constantly, and it just isn't.
I am adding this to my TBR for sure. So
yeah. I think it's so cute. I've read it multiple times. I don't know how it isn't better known.
oh my gosh, I thank you for sharing. So new readers can discover it. So, Elizabeth, tell us where we can find you online.
I've got a book group on Facebook, Elizabeth O'Rourke Books, and on Instagram at Elizabeth O'Rourke. And my website is ElizabethO'Rourke.com.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for being a show.
Yeah, thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support the podcast. For a list of books mentioned and other book recommendations, please visit whattoreadnextblog.com. Thank you so much for listening and happy reading.